Marcus Hill woke at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm. He didn't need the phone to tell him the time anymore. His body had learned to wake in the dark, in the cold, in the silence before anyone else stirred. The apartment was cold, not just cool, genuinely cold. The landlord's idea of winter heating never quite reached the back bedrooms. But by now Marcus had learned to move efficiently through the darkness. He pulled on grey sweatpants and padded down the narrow hallway. His bare feet remembered every creak in the floor, the fourth plank from the wall, the one near the bathroom. He knew them all. Sophia's room was at the end of the hall. She was 7 years old, small for her age, and when he pushed open her door, he found her the way he always did, buried under 2 comforters and the weighted blanket, the one he'd saved 4 months to buy. The thing had cost $380, which meant he'd cut back on groceries, delayed some car maintenance, picked up extra weekend contracts. But the sleep specialist said it would help with her anxiety, and when Marcus made a decision about Sophia's well-being, he didn't hesitate. Her inhaler sat on the nightstand next to a glass of water, positioned exactly where the pulmonologist had recommended, not on the dresser, not on a shelf, on the nightstand, within arm's reach. Marcus checked it every morning without fail. The allergy season was coming, and her asthma had been acting up more frequently lately. He'd noticed her breathing becoming slightly labored during coding club last Tuesday. Nothing alarming, but enough to make him more careful. He didn't wake her yet. He had 40 minutes before they needed to leave for school. 40 minutes to make breakfast, to pack her lunch with the specific brand of applesauce she'd eat, the organic one from the co-op, not the store brand, even though both were technically the same thing to anyone else. But not to Sophia, and to check that her book report was in her backpack. The Tuesday before he'd forgotten, just slipped his mind, while he was managing an email exchange with a client whose network had crashed. Sophia had cried in the car, not because she was upset with him, but because she hated disappointing Mrs. Kading. That had gutted him more than any of her tears about missing her mother. Sharon had left 3 years ago. And while those tears made sense, these tears were different, the ones about disappointing a teacher who actually noticed her. Those cut deeper somehow. By 6:30, oatmeal was cooling in 2 bowls. His was plain, just the way he'd learned to eat it growing up. Economical, practical, no fuss. Hers had cinnamon and a drizzle of honey, stirred in so it created swirls through the whole bowl. She loved the pattern of it. Marcus had learned to notice the things that made his daughter feel cared for. It wasn't the expensive weighted blanket necessarily. It was the honey stirred in exactly right, creating a pattern she could see before she tasted it. He woke her gently, the way the parenting forum had suggested, before he knew about parenting forums, before they became his lifeline. Hand on her shoulder, soft voice, gradually brighter lights. "Hey butterfly, school day." Sophia blinked awake. Her eyes found his face first, always his face, then the window, where snow had fallen overnight, pressing thick against the glass. She studied the accumulation like it was a problem she needed to solve. "It snowed again," she said. "Not quite a question. Looks like it. Purple boots or grey boots?" Marcus filed this away. The fact that she had asked about the purple ones instead of just wearing them. Last week, the squeak of the sole in the school hallway had bothered her so much that she'd asked to walk silently. "No one was looking at you," he'd said, but that wasn't the point. The point was that she'd been aware of the possibility of being looked at, and the awareness was the problem. "Grey," she said before he could answer. "Purple squeaks." They ate in comfortable quiet. Sophia reviewed her multiplication flashcards between bites. 8 times 7, 9 times 6. The patterns were beginning to make sense to her. Marcus checked his phone while she studied. 2 client emails. both routine. One from a small law firm needing a security audit, one from the hospital system that had become a regular contract. He ran his own IT consulting business from home, which meant flexible hours, which meant he could be the one to pick Sophia up from school every day, which meant every missed deadline was his fault alone, which meant he carried the full weight of their survival on his own shoulders. It was fine. He'd learned to carry things. Dad, you're butterfly. Can I do coding club on Thursdays? Mrs. Keating said there's space. I want to make a game where you solve math problems to build a castle. Something in his chest loosened. This was the thing. This was the moment that made the whole thing worthwhile. Not because she wanted coding, but because she wanted to build something with him. Metaphorically, because his work mattered to her, because even though they were struggling, there was still this moment where his daughter looked at him and saw possibility instead of just survival. Thursday is my grocery day, Marcus said, thinking fast. Sophia's face fell slightly, but he continued, I can move it to Wednesday. You really want to? I want to make the castle game, she said. I think it would be cool. Then yes, Marcus said, absolutely yes, we'll figure it out. By 7:40 they walked 3 blocks to Brookfield Elementary. The snow had been cleared, but kept falling. Fat flakes that caught in Sophia's braids. She'd started wearing braids last year. And at 7 years old she was already aware that braids meant something in her school. They marked her as black. They marked her as someone whose hair needed to be done a particular way. Which was fine, which was beautiful, but which also meant she was visible in a specific way to the other kids. Marcus tried to protect her from the awareness, but that was like trying to protect her from gravity. The awareness was already there, already shaping how she moved through the world. Other parents clustered near the entrance, mostly mothers, a few fathers in business casual, everyone white, except for Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who ran the bodega on the corner. Marcus had learned not to expect conversation. He wasn't unfriendly, but he also wasn't going to pretend he fit into their world, the world of SUV carpools and weekend ski trips and volunteer committees that made decisions about fundraisers. He worked, he parented, that was enough. But today Jenny Patterson appeared with her determinedly cheerful smile, the kind that made Marcus's shoulders tighten before she'd even opened her mouth. Marcus, Jenny said, touching his arm in that way people do when they want something. I meant to ask, are you coming to the Winter Gala fundraiser? We're trying to get as many families as we can. It's really for the kids, you know. New playground equipment, only $150 per ticket. Marcus kept his expression neutral. He'd gotten good at this. The neutral face, the professional voice, the way of moving through rejection without flinching. The gala is $150 per ticket. Well, 2 tickets if you're bringing a partner, but if it's just you. Probably not this year, Marcus said. Sophia's hand tightened in his. She understood exactly what was happening, even at 7. She understood the math perfectly. $150 per ticket meant that Marcus would have to choose between that and 3 weeks of groceries. It meant that some families could afford luxury and other families couldn't. And the school was very kindly offering the opportunity for Marcus to feel the difference in real time on a Friday night, surrounded by people who could comfortably drop $300 on an event. Jenny's smile didn't break, but it thinned slightly. That's too bad. It really is for the kids, though. We're hoping to make this a meaningful community event. Marcus gave her his professional smile, the one he used with clients who assumed he was tech support. Not the consultant they'd hired, the one that was polite and warm and kept everything at a distance. Sophia's my priority, he said. He'd said Sophia, which was right. Her name was Sophia, but he could see Jenny's confusion for just a moment. If she needs playground equipment, I'll donate directly to the school. He'd said Lena by mistake before when stressed, but this time he got it right. Jenny nodded and turned away. The interaction was complete. The boundary had been established. Sophia looked up at him. "You don't have to come to stuff, Dad." "I know you're busy. I come to things that matter," Marcus said. "Your recital, your parent-teacher conferences, the coding club showcase is going to matter, right?" Her smile was small, but real. He watched her disappear into the building, her backpack almost as big as her torso, and felt the familiar weight settle across his shoulders. Not self-pity exactly. He'd worked through that 2 years ago, in therapy, when Sharon had first left. This was different. This was the simple arithmetic of single parenthood. Every decision was his, every mistake, every victory, every Tuesday morning panic about forgotten homework, every conversation with a woman trying to sell him access to community, every moment his daughter understood, without being told, that their family was different. Marcus pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. Today he had a system maintenance call at 11. The afternoon was free. He'd prep dinner early, maybe get ahead on some invoices. He didn't know that in 4 hours he'd meet someone who would make him reconsider what his life could look like. He didn't know yet that sometimes the most important things aren't planned at all. They happen in the spaces between intention and chance. And they arrive with the kind of inevitability that makes you wonder if you were always moving toward them. Diana Chen's office occupied the northwest corner of the 17th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed view of Boston Harbor. And on clear days she could see planes descending toward Logan Airport, their lights blinking in the darkness. Today she saw only snow, and the grey suggestion of water beyond it. She'd arrived at 6:15 a.m. As always, the cleaning crew was still working, pushing their carts down the hallway. The coffee not yet brewed in the executive kitchen. Diana preferred it this way. The building quiet, her mind clear. 2 hours to work before her assistant arrived, and the day's chaos began. At 47, she was the youngest senior partner at Hutchinson & Reed, one of the most prestigious law firms in Boston. She was also one of only 3 women in that position. She'd made it to the top by being sharper than her competitors, more prepared, more willing to work 100-hour weeks than anyone else. Anyone else who had family obligations to consider. She'd made it by sacrificing things that other people considered non-negotiable. Her marriage, for instance. David had filed for divorce 5 years ago, citing fundamental incompatibility, which was lawyer speak for, "You care more about winning cases than building a life together." He wasn't wrong. Diana had attended her own father's funeral via conference call because she was in the middle of a merger negotiation. She'd missed 3 anniversaries in a row, but she'd never missed a deadline, never lost a case she'd personally led, never showed weakness. She settled into her chair, opened the brief on her desk. A pharmaceutical company accused of price fixing, a case that was ugly and morally ambiguous, and would pay enough to cover her annual salary twice over, and began reading. The work consumed her attention in a way that nothing else in her life could. The work was clean. The work had rules. The work was something she could actually win. At 8:15 her phone buzzed, a text from her sister Diane. They'd given up talking directly most of the time, because the conversations always went the same way. "Are you coming to Emma's spring recital? She's asking about Aunt Diana." Diana's niece was 9 years old. Diana had seen her maybe 4 times in the last 2 years. She typed back, "I'll try. Calendar is complicated right now." Diane's response came within a minute. "It always did. It's always complicated, Diana." Diana set the phone face down and returned to the pharmaceutical brief in front of her. She made a note about the deposition strategy. She made another note about case precedent. She buried herself in the work, because that was something she understood, something she was good at, something that didn't require her to pretend to be someone she wasn't, or to apologize for the choices she'd made. By 8:30, when Margaret knocked and entered with coffee, Black no sugar, exactly the way Diana preferred. She'd already read 40 pages and made 3 strategy pivots that she knew would matter when they got to trial. Margaret was 62, had worked for Diana for 6 years, and had the particular kind of wisdom that came from understanding your boss's patterns without judgment. She placed the coffee on the left side of Diana's desk, the schedule on cream card stock on the right. "You have the Morrison deposition at 9, Margaret said. "Lunch with Robert Chen at 12:30, then the partnership meeting at 3. Anything else, you got another invitation to the Sullivan wedding. It came yesterday. I left it on your desk." Diana glanced at the heavy envelope Margaret had placed there. Catherine Sullivan was a junior partner, marrying some finance executive. The wedding was in Vermont at some resort that Diana had probably stayed at for a corporate retreat at some point in her career. Everything blended together. "RSVP regrets," Diana said automatically. "You've declined the last 4 wedding invitations," Margaret said carefully. She said it the way someone says something important, without quite admitting that what they're saying is important. "I don't enjoy weddings," Diana said. Margaret, who'd worked for Diana long enough to know when to push, said quietly, "People notice when you never attend social functions. It's part of the job at the relationship building." Diana looked up from her brief. "People notice everything I do anyway," she said. "That's the job. Whether I attend weddings or not isn't going to change their calculations about whether I'm serious, or whether I'm weak, or whether I'll stay in Boston, or whether I'm ready for the partnership committee decision next year." After Margaret left, Diana opened the invitation anyway. Thick paper, elegant script, a weekend in February at the Snow Peak Lodge, a luxury resort in Vermont. The kind of place where people went to celebrate things. Diana hadn't been to a celebration in so long that she wasn't sure she'd remember how to move through one. +1 encouraged. She stared at those 3 words like they were a test she didn't know how to take. +1. Someone to sit beside at dinner. Someone to make conversation with during the cocktail hour. Someone to indicate that Diana had a life outside of her career. That she was capable of forming attachments. That she wasn't just a brilliantly functioning machine in an expensive suit. She'd been alone long enough that alone had started to feel like a choice rather than a circumstance. But staring at those 3 words +1 encouraged something shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way she could articulate, just a small crack in the armor she'd built so carefully over so many years. A small terrifying possibility that she didn't want to be alone anymore. Diana set the invitation aside and went back to work. But the crack remained. The small possibility remained. And for the rest of the day, even as she demolished opposing counsel in her deposition and made notes for the partnership meeting, a tiny part of her mind stayed fixed on those 3 words, +1 encouraged. The coffee shop was expensive. The kind of place where people who worked in the building next door came to feel like they had good taste and money. Marcus had arrived 15 minutes early for his meeting, which meant sitting at a table he didn't choose, drinking coffee he didn't order, feeling acutely aware of his shirt. It was clean, it was pressed, but it wasn't expensive, and everyone could tell. He was reviewing notes on his phone, preparing for the security audit pitch, when a shadow fell across his table. He looked up to find a woman in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of posture that indicated someone who'd made a career out of being right. "Marcus Hill?" she asked. He stood to greet her. "Yes, Diana Chen." They shook hands. Her grip was firm, but not aggressive, just strong. Diana sat down without asking permission, which was the kind of thing only certain kinds of people did. She ordered her coffee with a gesture, just a nod toward the barista, and it arrived immediately, as if she'd been waiting for her all along. "I reviewed your portfolio," Diana said without preamble. You rebuilt the security infrastructure for Connolly Banking 3 years ago. That was sophisticated work. The way you identified the vulnerability in the authentication layer, that was elegant. Marcus wasn't used to being seen as sophisticated. He wasn't used to people using words like elegant to describe his work. Thank you. But I want to understand why you're running a solo consulting business instead of working for a major firm. You have the credentials. The question shouldn't have landed the way it did. It was professional, straightforward. But something in the way she asked it, something in the genuine curiosity, made him answer honestly instead of defensively. Have a daughter, he said. 7 years old, single-parent situation. A firm would want hours I don't have. Diana studied him for a moment.
Not with pity, with recognition. My ex-husband said something similar when we divorced, she said. Except he meant I should change my career, not him. She didn't smile when she said it. Just stated it like fact. That's not what I'm saying, Marcus said carefully. I'm saying I made a choice about what mattered, and your daughter came first. Yeah. Diana nodded once, took a sip of her coffee.
I need a comprehensive security audit. Your firm would be expensive, but the work you did for Connolly proved you're worth what you charge. You quoted $5,000 for the initial assessment and implementation plan. That's the standard rate for I'm going to have Margaret send you a revised contract. Diana interrupted. 15,000, same scope of work. Marcus didn't know what to say. You're good at what you do, Diana said. And there was something in her voice that suggested she didn't give compliments easily. Stop underpricing it. Stop acting like flexibility around your daughter makes you worth less. The market doesn't work that way, and neither should you, she stood. Start Monday. Margaret will handle the logistics. Then she walked out of the coffee shop without waiting for a response. Marcus sat there for a long moment, staring at his coffee, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd gone into the meeting expecting to pitch. Instead, he'd been hired. More than that, he'd been seen. This woman, this powerful woman in her expensive suit had looked at his portfolio and recognized not just competence, but sophistication. And then she'd done something even more remarkable. She'd refused to let him diminish what he brought to the table. She'd refused to let him be small. Over the next 8 weeks, the security audit expanded. Or rather, the meetings about the security audit expanded. Diana had legitimate reasons to meet with Marcus. Project updates, implementation strategy, vendor selection. But somewhere around the third meeting, something shifted. They stopped meeting in conference rooms and started meeting at restaurants, small places where they could talk without being overheard by the entire firm. They talked about the project less and about other things more. Diana asked about Sophia. Marcus was cautious at first. He'd learned not to volunteer much about his daughter to professional contacts. But Diana's questions weren't the usual small talk variety. She didn't ask how old is she like it was a checkbox. She asked, what does she love to do? And then she actually listened to the answer. She wants to join coding club, Marcus said during their 5th lunch. They were at a small Italian restaurant near Diana's office. And Diana had somehow managed to make it feel intimate, instead of transactional. She wants to make a game that teaches math. I told her yes, we'd figure it out with her schedule. Diana's expression softened. Actually softened. It was like watching someone take off armor piece by piece. How old is she? Diana asked. 7. Does she love coding already, or is she doing this because you do? The question was direct. Without judgment, just curiosity. Honestly, Marcus said, I think she's trying to connect with me. I work with computers, so in her 7-year-old logic, learning code means being like me. Diana was quiet for a moment. She set down her fork. Does she know you'd be proud of her no matter what she asked? Marcus looked at her. Do you know if my parents were proud of me? Diana's smile was sad, genuinely sad. No. They were proud of my accomplishments, my grades, my law school acceptance, my partnership. That's not the same as being proud of me as a person. I spent most of my life chasing the accomplishment because I was never sure about the person. She pulled out her phone and texted someone. Then she set it face down on the table. I just moved my 4 p.m., she said. I have another hour. Tell me more about Sophia. What else does she love? For the first time in 5 years, Diana extended a lunch meeting that wasn't about work. And for the first time in 5 years, nobody else mattered during that hour. Not the firm, not the cases, not the partnership track, or the client meetings, or the carefully constructed version of herself that she presented to the world. Just this moment with someone who was actually listening. By the 7th lunch, something had shifted fundamentally. Marcus had become the person Diana unloaded to. Her fears about the partnership committee, her guilt about her sister's recital, the way success had somehow become indistinguishable from isolation. Diana had become the person who believed in Marcus, without explanation or qualification. She'd become the person who saw him as more than a man managing single parenthood, more than a consultant underpricing his work, more than a black man in spaces that weren't built for him. That day, Diana said something that changed everything. There's a wedding, she said. One of my colleagues is getting married in Vermont. The firm will expect me to attend. I've declined the last few wedding invitations because I didn't want to go alone, and I didn't want people to ask me questions about why I was there without a +1. She set down her fork and looked at him directly. I'm thinking of going, she said. Marcus didn't ask why. He understood. Alone didn't sound good anymore. The world felt too big, and success felt too hollow, and the armor felt too heavy, and the possibility of being seen with someone who really mattered not as a career move or a status symbol suddenly became the most important thing. Will you come with me? Diana asked. It was the most vulnerable thing she'd said to him. Marcus reached across the table, not to hold her hand, just to make it available. She didn't take it, but she looked at it, and her eyes went soft. If I bring you, she said, people will make assumptions about who you are, about why I'm with you, and I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not, and I'm not going to ask you to be someone you're not, and I'm not going to apologize for the age difference or the career difference or any of it. Okay, Marcus said, people will judge us, I know, and you still want to go. Marcus thought about Sophia, about doing things alone, about someone looking at him and seeing more than his limitations. About someone looking at him and seeing him. Yeah, he said, I do. Diana finally picked up her water glass, drank it all the way down. Okay then, she said. She said it like she was making a decision. That couldn't be unmade. Marcus called his mother that night. You need childcare this weekend, she asked without preamble. She had the particular gift of mothers, who know things without being told. Yeah. Saturday and Sunday. There was a pause. His mother was good at pauses. She'd raised him with pauses, had taught him that sometimes the most important communications happened in silence. This for a woman, she asked. Marcus had no idea how she knew, but his mother had always been able to read him. Yes. What's her situation? Divorced. Senior lawyer, powerful, kind of brilliant. Another pause. She's single. Yeah, and she asked you to go to a wedding with her. Yes. His mother took a breath. Marcus could hear her in the kitchen. Maybe pouring herself tea. Maybe just breathing. Sophia, no, not yet. You're going to tell her. Yeah, I'm going to tell her. And if she doesn't react well, Marcus looked out his window at the snow-covered street below. Then I made my decision wrong. His mother's voice softened. Butterfly used to cry every Sunday night because she thought you were lonely. She'd say, Daddy's always working. She doesn't understand that sometimes working alone is protecting her. I know, Marcus said, but maybe it's also limiting her, his mother continued. Maybe when she sees you with someone who chooses you, she learns something about what she's worth too. Maybe she learns that being loved by someone isn't something to be scared of. After they hung up, Marcus sat with that thought. He pulled out his phone and texted Diana, "I want you to know I'm bringing pieces of my life with me. My daughter is part of everything I do. If this goes somewhere, she matters." Diana responded, "Within a minute, I know. And I'm terrified. And I'm still going." The next morning, Marcus told Sophia about the wedding. "I'm going to a wedding with a friend from work," he said over breakfast. Sophia looked up from her oatmeal. "Is she nice?" "She's smart and strong and I like spending time with her." Sophia didn't ask more questions, which was the thing about children. They could sense when to press and when to let something be. "Is she coming to pick you up?" Sophia asked. That was the real question. That was the question about whether this was temporary or real, whether it mattered, or whether it was just another thing adults did that didn't really mean anything. "She's meeting me there," Marcus said.
"Grandma is staying with you. Don't forget about me," Sophia said. It was such a small thing, such a simple thing, but it broke him a little. The idea that she would even need to say it. The idea that after 7 years of devotion, she's still worried that he might forget her. "Never," Marcus said. "You're my butterfly. That's not something I could forget even if I tried." The drive to Vermont took 3 hours. Diana picked Marcus up Friday afternoon in a black sedan. That probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. He'd borrowed a suit from a friend. Charcoal grey, carefully tailored to fit his frame. It looked good. It looked professional. It was still borrowed. And they both knew it. They didn't talk much during the drive. The magnitude of what they were doing was too large for casual conversation. The snow began midway, visibility dropping, the world becoming smaller, more intimate. At one point, Marcus asked, "You nervous?" Diana's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Terrified. You're. Why?" "Because this matters," Marcus said. "That's why." They arrived at Snow Peak Lodge at 5 p.m., and Marcus immediately understood why Diana had been hesitant to come alone. The place was breathtaking. All wood beams, stone fireplaces, views of the Green Mountains in the distance, but it was also unquestionably expensive. Unquestionably a place for people who didn't have to check their account balance before making decisions. Diana had booked a suite overlooking the mountain. There were 2 beds, which felt both practical and symbolic. Neither of them was quite ready to assume what this was. The wedding reception was held in a ballroom, with floor-to-ceiling windows, snow pressing thick against the glass. Servers moved through the room with champagne and appetizers. The gathered crowd was Diana's world. Lawyers, partners, people who'd made it to positions of power by being smart and ambitious and willing to sacrifice things that mattered. Marcus had borrowed the suit, but he couldn't borrow the bearing. He wore his careful smile, the one he used when people assumed things about him that weren't true. The moment Diana and Marcus walked into the reception together, the room did something subtle, not obvious, not dramatic, but every conversation shifted. Eyes began their calculations. Age, status. The unspoken question that everyone asked when they encountered something that didn't make sense to them. Who doesn't belong here? Then someone asked the question. That would define the entire evening. The question came from Virginia Ashford, a senior partner at the firm, a woman with silver hair, a sharp smile, and the kind of power that came from decades of being right in rooms full of people. She was Diana's colleague and rival, though Diana would never have admitted the rivalry. Virginia had been watching them all evening, watching with the particular intensity of someone who sensed a challenge to the order she'd worked to maintain. They were seated at a dinner table, with Robert, Diana's closest ally at the firm, and Margaret, Diana's assistant. Virginia smiled across the table with her particular brand of calculated charm. "Diana,"
I have to ask, Virginia said,
her voice bright with the dangerous edge underneath. How long have you two known each other? A few months, Diana said. Virginia's smile deepened. Fascinating. Because last year at this very event, you spent the entire evening explaining why you didn't have time for dating. You said, and I quote, "I have a demanding career and I'm not interested in playing house with someone who doesn't understand my priorities."
The table went quiet. I remember Diana said carefully.
Virginia leaned back in her chair, still smiling, her eyes never leaving Diana's face.
So what changed? Did your career suddenly become less demanding? Or did you finally decide that playing house might be nice after all? She took a sip of wine, her eyes never leaving Diana's face. And Marcus, Virginia continued, turning her attention to him with the precision of a surgeon selecting an instrument. You work from home, correct? That must be perfect for managing childcare. Juggling everything. The word juggling landed like a hit. She was systematically deconstructing him. But not through attack, through questions, through feigned curiosity, through a tone of voice that suggested she was simply trying to understand, when really she was trying to diminish. I imagine it takes a certain kind of man, Virginia said,
to be comfortable with his partner making 10 times what he does. Professionally speaking, no judgment, of course. There's actually something quite respectable about a man who handles the household side of things. Someone has to, and it's not a small job. She just told the entire table, explicitly, clearly for anyone listening, that Marcus was a kept man, that he was dependent, that he'd brought himself to this wedding hoping to improve his situation through association.
Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the room. He felt the moment the air shifted, the moment people began to reassess him through that new lens. A man trading on his proximity to a successful woman, a man without credentials, without power, without anything except his willingness to be managed. He looked at Diana. Her face was carefully controlled, the way it always was when she was in a room full of lawyers. But he saw it, a flicker of something underneath. Not doubt about him. Doubt about herself. Doubt about whether Virginia was right, whether she'd made a mistake bringing him here. And that's when Marcus understood something. That would change everything. Virginia wasn't attacking him to diminish him. She was attacking Diana, using him as the weapon. The message was clear: you're ridiculous, you're slumming, you're throwing away years of carefully constructed authority for someone beneath your station. You've made a mistake. Marcus set down his fork with deliberate care. The action was small, but it carried weight. The sound of the fork meeting the plate seemed loud. In the sudden quiet, he looked directly at Virginia. "Virginia," he said, his voice quiet in the way that makes people lean in to hear. "You've spent the last 5 minutes asking questions you already know the answers to." Everyone stopped eating. "You know I run my own business," Marcus continued. "You can see it in the way Diana talks about me. You know it's successful because someone successful wouldn't introduce you to someone unsuccessful. You know I'm here because Diana asked me to be. But what you're doing the way you're asking, you're not curious. You're testing whether Diana will let you diminish this, whether I'll get defensive and prove something, whether she'll apologize for her choices and accept your version of what she should want." He paused, letting the words settle. "So let me be clear about something Marcus said. I'm not embarrassed about my life. I'm not intimidated by yours. And I'm not going to pretend that a woman with Diana's power and intelligence couldn't choose to be with me for actual reasons. Real reasons. Because that would mean accepting your premise that a successful woman can only make mistakes, never choices." He turned to look directly at Diana.
"What I'm curious about," he said, "is why Virginia needs to diminish this. That tells me something important. It tells me that in her world, people who are genuinely happy together don't need defending. But people who are threatening, people who break the rules that other people have agreed to follow, those people take apart at dinner tables. He turned back to Virginia.
And she should be terrified. Because when successful women stop performing when they actually choose what they want instead of what looks good, the people who need that performance usually lose power. They lose the ability to control the narrative. And that's what you're really afraid of. He reached over and took Diana's hand deliberately. Not romantic, just clear. I'm glad I'm here, Marcus said to Diana. And he meant every word. I'm glad you brought me. Then he returned to his plate and took a bite of his food. Like the conversation was over. The table held its breath for a moment. Virginia had no move. Any response would prove his point. Any attempt to defend would only deepen the wound. She took a long drink of wine and set down her glass with slightly more force than necessary. The rest of the table slowly returned to eating. But the dynamic had shifted. Permanently. Margaret was looking at Marcus with something close to awe. Robert was hiding a smile behind his napkin. And Diana was looking at Marcus like he just offered her something she didn't know she needed. The rest of the evening unfolded differently after that. People began approaching him specifically, with something that looked like respect. A few even nodded with what looked like approval. By the time dessert came, the entire room had recalibrated. Virginia left about 10 minutes into the dessert course, claiming a headache. Nobody believed her, everyone knew what had happened, and Diana had not broken under the pressure to apologize or diminish herself. That meant something. That meant a lot. The balcony was empty, snow falling steadily into the darkness. Diana had excused herself from the table after dinner, needing air, needing space, needing to process the fact that everything had changed. Marcus found her 15 minutes later, standing in a thin dress, no coat, her shoulders hunched against the cold. You didn't have to do that, she said without turning around. She was wrong, and she was attacking you, not me. Diana turned to face him, her eyes were wet. Was it worth it? Did you feel small tonight? Even for a second, Marcus wanted to lie. Lying would have been kinder, but she'd asked for truth, so he gave it to her. Yes, he said, when she said I work from home for childcare because it's true and it felt like it made me less. Diana's jaw tightened. That's because I created that situation. I created a moment where you had to defend yourself at dinner instead of just enjoying the evening. You created a moment where you chose something for yourself, Marcus said. That's not selfish, that's growth. Diana wrapped her arms around herself. Is it? Or am I just 47 years old and finally wanting something badly enough that I don't care what it costs? What do you think it will cost? Diana looked at him with water in her eyes, and her voice shook when she spoke. Everything. My reputation. The partnership recommendation I've been working toward for 3 years. Virginia sits on the senior partnership committee. What she does with what happened tonight could derail my entire career trajectory. Marcus stepped closer. Do you want me to leave? I can book another room. I can drive back tonight. I can make it simpler. No, Diana said immediately. No, that's not what I want. But then she articulated everything she was afraid of. Her fear about his daughter. Her fear that she didn't know how to be with someone. Her fear that this would complicate his business, his reputation, his future derailed by association. Her fear that she was going to hurt him. Because she was too old, too ambitious, too much work. When she finished, there was a long silence. Snow fell around them. The sounds of the reception drifted from inside the lodge. Then Marcus reached out his hand. She looked at it like it might hurt her. What if we figure it out together, he said. Not as successful woman and her guy, just as two people who are terrified and going anyway. Diana looked at his hand, at his face. Then she placed her hand in his. And for the first time since they'd met, they weren't performing for anyone. They weren't managing impressions or protecting themselves with clever words. They were just two people in the cold, trying to believe they could make something real. We should probably go back in, Diana said eventually. Make an appearance, show we're not running away. Do you want to? Marcus asked. Not particularly. Then why? Diana smiled sadly. Because I'm not going to let Virginia Ashford think she drove me out of my colleague's wedding. Marcus smiled too. Fair enough. They walked back inside together, and the reception had shifted in their absence. People were dancing now, the formal dinner over, the room more relaxed. But as they crossed to their table, conversations paused. Eyes followed. This time, though, the quality of attention was different. Less judgment, more curiosity. A few people even nodded at them with what looked like approval. Robert intercepted them near the bar. That was quite a speech, he said to Marcus. I wasn't planning it, Marcus said. Best ones never are, Robert replied. He looked at Diana. Virginia left about 10 minutes ago, claimed a headache. Diana smiled dryly. I'm sure she did. For what it's worth, Robert said she had it coming. She's been pulling that kind of power play for years. Sunday morning they had breakfast in the lodge restaurant, before driving back to Boston. The drive was easier than the trip up. More conversation, less tension, the beginning of something neither of them could quite name yet, but that felt real. Marcus' phone buzzed when they hit the city limits. It was his mother. Texting on Sophia's behalf. Did you have fun, Dad? He texted back. Yeah, I did. Diana glanced over. What will you tell her? The truth. That I went with you, that some people were rude, that I stood up to them because that's what you do when someone you care about is being treated unfairly. Will that confuse her about what we are? Probably, Marcus said honestly. She's 7, but she'll understand that people deserve to be treated well, and that sometimes you have to say something. There was a pause. And then Diana asked the question that suggested she'd been thinking about this. The whole drive back. Can I meet her officially? She asked. Not coffee shop coincidences. Intentional. Real. Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Something like hope. But more solid than that. Something like destiny. If he believed in that sort of thing. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. What should I know about her? Diana asked. Marcus listed the things: Sophia's brilliance, her kindness, her particular way of seeing the world. She's going to ask you if you like coding and if you've read the right books. And if you lie, she'll know. Diana laughed. I'm a lawyer. I can handle a 7-year-old interrogation. They pulled up to Diana's building in Back Bay. Before she got out, she turned back to him. This weekend was terrifying, she said. Yeah, and I want to do it again. The wedding or the being with you part, Diana kissed him. Soft, careful, like she was still learning what it meant to let someone in. Both, she said. Marcus drove across town to pick up Sophia from his mother's house. His mother greeted them with a knowing smile when he arrived. Something in her expression that said she understood exactly what had happened in Vermont. Sophia ran to him, threw her arms around him. Did you have fun? I did, Marcus said. Come here. I want to tell you about Diana. They sat on the couch together. Sophia tucked under his arm. And Marcus explained about the wedding, about the woman he'd brought, about the fact that Diana was someone he cared about, and that she wanted to meet Sophia officially. Is she staying with us? Sophia asked. And Marcus heard the hope and fear mixed equally in her voice. I don't know yet, Marcus said honestly. But if she does, it won't be by accident. And she won't disappear when things get hard. That's the kind of person she is. Sophia considered this seriously. Okay, I want to meet her. That Sunday, Diana and Sophia met at a weekend brunch. In a neutral place. A small cafe that Sophia loved. Diana didn't condescend. She didn't ask the kinds of questions adults usually asked 7-year-olds. Instead, she asked Sophia about coding, about her game design, about what it meant to be one of 3 black kids in her grade. Sophia quizzed Diana back, grilled her about books she'd read, coding project she'd worked on, whether she was smart or just grown-up smart. Diana answered every question directly, never pretending to know more than she did, never pretending to understand coding at a level she hadn't reached. By the end of brunch, Sophia had decided something. As they were leaving the cafe, Sophia reached out and took Diana's hand without being asked. Marcus watched the moment, felt the weight of it. His daughter, his careful, protective, guard your heart daughter, choosing connection with this woman, choosing to risk the possibility of loss in order to experience the possibility of being loved. That night, Marcus texted Diana, "Thank you for seeing her, for seeing me, for choosing us." Diana responded within a minute, "Thank you for standing up, for being brave enough to want something, for changing my life." 6 months later, they hadn't moved in together, weren't engaged, didn't have concrete labels for what they were, beyond what they felt, which was real, which was serious, which was something neither of them took for granted anymore. Marcus's IT business had doubled. Diana had recommended him to 3 major clients, not because of their relationship, but because of the quality of his work. He'd stopped underpricing himself, had started charging what he was worth, had started understanding that providing for his daughter didn't require him to be small. Diana had made senior partner, not because she'd compromised her relationship with Marcus, but because she'd stopped performing and started leading. Because she'd allowed herself to be human, vulnerable, tired sometimes, committed to something beyond her career. Her work had gotten better, not worse. When she'd started prioritizing connection, Virginia had been quietly shifted out of the partnership. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be contested, just a series of committee changes and case reassignments that made it clear she was no longer part of the firm's future. One evening, all 3 of them were together, making dinner. Sophia was telling Diana about a new project at school, a program to teach coding to other kids in her grade. Diana was listening with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, taking the project seriously. Marcus watched them from across the kitchen. Not perfect, not magical, just real. The conversation flowed easily. Sophia asked Diana about a particular coding language. Diana admitted she didn't know, but offered to figure it out together. Sophia seemed satisfied with that answer. Not because Diana had failed, but because Diana had acknowledged the limitation, while refusing to use it as an excuse to disengage. Later, after Sophia was asleep, Marcus and Diana sat on the couch together. "I was thinking," Diana said, "about what you said that night in Vermont, about how this all started because I didn't want to go to a wedding alone. Yeah, I went to my sister's house today. Emma's spring recital is next month. I told Diane I'm coming, and I'm bringing you and Sophia if that's okay." Marcus pulled her closer. "That's more than okay. I've spent a lot of years being alone because I thought alone was safer," Diana said. "But it turns out alone was just empty." And this she gestured to the space between them, the comfortable quiet, the knowledge that they mattered to each other. "This is scarier, but it's also more real. This is what choosing actually looks like," Marcus said. They sat in the quiet for a long time, not needing to fill the space with words. They'd learned that comfort existed in silence too, in the presence of someone who'd chosen you, despite all the reasons not to, in the presence of someone who'd stood up when the world tried to diminish you, in the presence of someone who had risked everything for the possibility of something real. 6 months ago, Diana had been attending firm events alone, her +1 an abstraction, a symbol of all the things she'd sacrificed. 6 months ago, Marcus had been living under the weight of assumptions about what single fathers could and couldn't do, about whether his choices made him less, Now they understood something different. They understood that showing up was a kind of courage, that choosing was a kind of power, that love, real love, not the idealized version, was quiet and consistent and built on the foundation of someone actually seeing you, actually believing you were worth seeing. Virginia had learned something too. Though neither of them knew if she'd truly integrated the lesson, she'd learned that power used only to diminish others eventually diminishes itself. That the carefully constructed narratives we maintain about who belongs and who doesn't crumble when someone refuses to accept the role they've been assigned. What Diana and Marcus had discovered together on a snowy February evening in Vermont was that the most dangerous threat to people like Virginia wasn't aggression or confrontation. It was someone choosing themselves, someone choosing authenticity over image, someone choosing connection over control. And so on this quiet evening, with Sophia sleeping upstairs, with the sounds of the city drifting through the windows, with the comfortable silence of two people who'd learned to trust each other, settling around them like a blanket, Marcus and Diana understood something fundamental. This was what victory looked like. Not triumph, not vindication, just the quiet, consistent choice to show up for each other day after day, knowing full well the complications, the costs, the challenges that came with it. Sophia woke in the middle of the night, as she sometimes did, and padded into the living room, where Diana and Marcus still sat. "Are you guys staying?" she asked Diana, her voice small with sleep. Diana looked at Marcus. He nodded. "Yeah, butterfly," Diana said. And Marcus noticed how naturally she'd adopted his term of endearment. "I'm staying." Sophia climbed onto the couch between them. And all three of them sat there in the quiet. This family that the world hadn't expected to exist, that Virginia had tried to diminish, that Marcus and Diana had chosen anyway. This was the victory. This was the ending. Not a wedding, or a grand gesture, or a dramatic reversal of fortune, just a 7-year-old girl, a single father, and a woman who'd risked her carefully constructed world to be honest about what mattered, sitting together in the dark, together in the quiet, together in the real. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that real love looks like this, quiet, brave, true, please subscribe to our channel. We tell stories about grace, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to love well. Stories about people who refuse to be diminished, who stand up when it matters, who choose each other anyway. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now.